Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. The Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. For the record, today is Friday, June 26, 2020, and the time now is 9:01. Notice for this budget hearing was disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First public notice was issued on Tuesday, June 16, 2020, and the second notice was issued on Tuesday, June 23rd. The committee will hear and accept testimonies on Bill 282-35 LS, the fiscal year 2021 Budget Act as requested by the governor, relative to the Department of Revenue and Taxation, DRT, fiscal year 2021 budget request. Joining me for this budget hearing is the oversight chair of the Department of Revenue and Taxation is Senator Sabina Perez, and also Senator Therese Terlai, Senator Tello Taitagui, Senator Jim Moylan, and Senator Mary Torres. The conduct of this budget hearing shall be as follows. Those testifying on behalf of the department will be recognized by myself and invited to the panel, and we have already invited Daphne Shimzu and Edmund Villanueva. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony may be read, and lengthy testimony should be summarized. Testimony shall be confined to the substance. I remind my colleagues and the department that we are going to be discussing your 2021 budget. We may ask questions of 2020, but it's more focused on the 2021. Individuals will be allowed to present oral testimony. Once you're done, you may be asked to remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony as may be desired by the members of the committee. I will ask you now to just stay in the room. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for these proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and or may be asked to leave or be escorted from the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. You will state your name and title for the record. At this time, I ask the panel from the Department of Revenue and Taxation to rise and for our sergeant arms to please swear them in. Thank you, Sergeant Arms. I would now ask Ms. Shimizu, state your name and your title, and please begin your testimony for FY 2021 budget. Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chair. For the record, I'm Daphne Mansipit Shimizu, and I'm the Director of the Department of Revenue and Taxation. Today with me is Mr. Edmund Villanueva, who is our Chief of Administration, but let me go ahead and just hand the mic over to him so that he might be able to introduce himself.
My name is Edmund G. Villanueva, Chief of Administration, Department of Revenue and Taxation.
Mr. Chair, we do have a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, which we have worked with our AV here, the AV team here at the legislature. And so I might go ahead and just begin. Half a day, Honorable Senator Joe S. Agustin, Chairman for the Committee on General Governmental Operations, Appropriations, and Housing. Speaker Tina Munoz-Barnes, Speaker of the 35th Guam Legislature. Honorable Senator Sabina Flores Perez, who is our Oversight Chair and Chairwoman for the Committee on Environment, Revenue, and Taxation and Procurement, and other honorable senators of the 35th Guam Legislature. Today, we will be providing a brief presentation of DRT's FY 2021 budget. We will be going through our mission statement, goals and objectives, sharing information on our divisions and branches, as well as our active boards, going over budget highlights, and noting some of the accomplishments of our team from this last calendar year into the present. And so this is a basic outline of what we will be going over. Again, mission statement, our goals and objectives, our divisions, branches, and boards, some budget highlights, and some of the accomplishments that we have had over the last year. And so if you'll please move to the next slide. So DRT's mission statement is to apply and enforce tax and licensing laws with integrity and fairness, and to encourage voluntary compliance by educating customers to enhance and maintain public confidence. And if you'll please move to the next slide. We have goals and objectives of increasing enforcement efforts to establish and maintain public confidence in both the local and internal revenue tax systems as they apply to Guam, to increase taxpayer awareness of tax laws and reporting responsibilities in achieving a high degree of voluntary compliance, regulating holders of licenses for the protection of the consumers of Guam from unsafe, unsound, and unfair practices, work to improve e-commerce services as it pertains to the timely filing and submission of applications, tax documents, and/or other business forms. And if you'll please move to the next slide. To maximize the ability of our staff skills and expertise to support department-wide programs, to provide quality services in a cost-effective and timely manner, to enhance and improve processes and systems to achieve reduced customer lines and wait times across all service areas, and to support and further strengthen our regulatory boards and commissions as they execute their advisory and administrative authority and oversight. Please move to the next slide. And so now we're going to go over DRT's divisions and branches to provide a bit of a background on who we are. And so DRT has 6 divisions, and our first division that is listed is our Executive Direction Division, and that's basically our Director's Office. Under our Executive Direction Division, we have our Chief of Administration, which houses our Administrative Support and Personnel and our Passport Office. We also have our Technical Research and Appeals Bureau and our Systems and Programming Support. We have as well our Tax Enforcement Division that includes our Tax Examination Branch, our Tax Collections Branch, and our Criminal Investigation Branch. Next slide, please. In addition to, we have our Real Property Division, which includes our Tax Appraisal and Tax Assessment groups, and our Taxpayer Services Division, which includes our Income Tax Assistance and Processing Branch, our Business Privilege Tax Branch, our Electronic Data Processing Branch, Central Files, and our Accounting Branch. Next slide, please. And we also have a Regulatory Division that consists of our General Licensing and Registration Branch, our Compliance Branch, Weights and Measures, and Insurance, Securities, Banking, and Real Estate. And lastly, our Motor Vehicle Division, which includes our Driver's License Branch, our Vehicle Registration Branch, and our Department of Transportation. And that's really the makeup of DRT. And if you'll please move to the next slide. So this is a listing of our active boards. We currently have, our active boards are the ABC Board, the Banking and Insurance Board, our Board of Equalization, the Cannabis Control Board, and our Real Estate Commission. And if you'll please move to the next slide. So this is a basic summary, very brief summary of really what we're requesting for in this coming fiscal year for FY 2021. DRT is requesting approximately $12.5 million for the FY 2021 executive budget. This reflects an overall increase in appropriations, if approved, of about $208,000. And if you'll please move to the next slide. So what we wanted to do was to show to you, Mr. Chair and our honorable senators, a comparison of what we're requesting for in this year with the FY 2020 and the FY 2019 years. And so if you'll look at this particular slide, you'll see that for FY 2019, our FY 2019 actual was approximately $11.39 million. Our FY 2020 authorized level was $12.29 million. And what we're proposing for the FY 2021 budget is $12.498 million, or approximately $12.5 million. And if you'll please move to the next slide. In terms of kind of a breakdown of our $12.498 million request, we have personnel, which makes up about 68%, or $8.5 million. Contractual services, which is 18.5% almost, and that's about $2.3 million. Our office space rental, which is 11.45% of the total that we're requesting, and that's $1.431 million. And that's, it's important to note that our office space rental includes our utilities for our building at Barragata office. We have supplies and materials, which is just slightly less than 1%, and that's $119,640. The classification utilities, which actually is our telephone system contract, and that's $100,000, and that's, again, below 1%. Travel, which actually is our mileage reimbursement for, our team as they go out, and we have certain teams that do go out into the community, and that's the mileage reimbursement, and that's just a little bit over 0.1%. And we have $5,000 in our miscellaneous category and $1,000 in drug testing, and that's for, of course, our potential new hires, and that totals $12.498 million. And again, that's what is being requested for by DRT for FY 2021. And if you'll please move to the next slide. So we wanted to break down for you, Senators, the total requests that we're making for personnel. And we do have 6 divisions, as we mentioned earlier: our Executive Direction Division, our Tax Enforcement Division, our Real Property Tax Division, our Taxpayer Services Division, our Regulatory Division, and our Motor Vehicle Division. But we have an extra category here, which is TCEF, which is the Tax Collection Enhancement Fund. And the Tax Collection Enhancement Fund represents the monies that we get from our passport office. And that is actually to fund our passport group. And that is $426,084. And it represents 5% of the total we're requesting. And if we go back up to our executive direction group, we're requesting for $973,329. For our tax enforcement group, $2.8 million. For our real property tax group, about $789,000. Our taxpayer services group, $1.6 million. Our regulatory group, $1.3 million. And our motor vehicle group, $613,000. And if you'll please move to the next slide. So we wanted to share with you, Honorable Senators, some of the accomplishments that DRT has had over the last year. And of course, this is starting with FY19, but coming into, of course, FY 2020. And so in the last year, we actually began to regulate on bed and breakfast and short-term vacation rental entities. And in the fiscal year 19, that was actually the first time that we had issued notices of violation for bed and breakfast and short-term vacation rentals. And I thank GVB because I believe late toward the maybe third or fourth quarter last year, they did actually hold a forum on these types of entities, and that helped tremendously as we've been working to educate our community on what is involved in getting licensed for these entities. So our team does continue to work on the regulation of these entities, and most especially to help them and to educate them on how to get into compliance if there is a need. In the last fiscal year, FY19, we did begin to refer cases to the Office of the Attorney General for injunction, and there were still some cases that were being worked on by the OAG, I believe even in the late part of last calendar year in 2019. In the last year, in November 2019, we actually had on Guam, for the first time in about 6 years, 2 revenue IRS instructors who actually did training for our collections branch. And that was the first time in 6 years that we had that, and we were able to have 13 of our own revenue officers sit in a training for 3 weeks so that way, again, we can get our people to be technically competent. That's something that in fiscal year 2019, when we sat before you, Senator, honorable senators, we actually did request for, of course, or an advice that we would work on training. And so that's something that we actually were able to do. And again, not only were we able to get training for 13 of our own revenue officers, but we were also able to share in that resource with our Cnmi partners in, just to the north of us. And so we were able to also share that training with them, and they were able to send somebody to Guam to join with our team in that training. And if you please move to the next slide. Something as well that is also notable is that we were able to send 4 of our tax investigators from our criminal investigation branch to federal law enforcement training. And that's something that hasn't been done in over 20 years. And so that was something that was very important for us to make sure, again, as we work toward getting our people training and work toward making sure that our team is really technically competent to do the jobs that they are, supposed to be doing, that we're continuing to invest in these things. And so that, again, was something that was hugely important, and it was something that hadn't been done in over 2 decades. Toward the end of last year, we worked to reestablish the Business License and Permit Center. Of course, I'm grateful to DPW and the other Business License Permit Center teams because, we had began meeting in the last part of last year in 2019. In October 2019, DRT actually returned to the Business License Permit Center. We had not been there in about a year or so, and beginning January 2020, all of our departments were actually, that are part of the Business License and Permit Center, were present at the Business License Permit Center. Of course, we were slated to all begin to be there from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, beginning April 2020, but because of the public health emergency, we were not able to do that. But when we did open up on May 11, we were able to, especially with the help of DPW, to ensure that we're continuing to follow, social distancing and keep all of our people safe as they go to get their business licenses. But we are now, all of the Business License Permit Center agencies are actually there Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And so for the first time in a very long time, we actually have, our DRT, GFD, Public Health, Land Management, Guam EPA, and also our Treasurer of Guam, and DPW, of course, that's there. Something that's important to note that we did at DRT, for the first time ever, we actually have 3 representatives from DRT that are housed at the Business License Permit Center. And the reason we did this is so that way we would be able to truly be a one-stop, especially for our DRT people. So not only do we have a business license person, we also have a representative from our real property tax section and a representative from our collection section. And the reason we did that is so that if there are individuals who have business licenses that need to be renewed and they need clearance, that they wouldn't have to go up to the Barrigada office in order to get clearance. Now you could truly, for the most part, as long as there's no really challenging issues to clear, for the most part, we're able to generally clear income tax, BPT, and other collections issues down at the Business License Permit Center. So we're really working to truly make it a one-stop or one place to go when you need to work on getting your business licenses. And if you'll please move to the next slide. In addition to this, of course, over the last several months, we, as well as all the other agencies, have been working to help to contribute to the public health recovery efforts due to the coronavirus, the novel coronavirus. And so in line with that, as you know, we had been activated after the CARES Act had been passed and signed by President Trump to implement the Economic Impact Payment Program for Guam residents. As of June 25, which is yesterday, we had processed another $1.695 million, and that represents a little bit over 1,000 payments or checks. And so to date, we have processed over $126 million, which translates into about 68,900 payments to our people. We also were activated during the public health emergency to enforce on the executive orders which were issued regarding essential businesses, and to make sure that, of course, our people continue to be safe, and that only those businesses that were listed by public health in their guidance that as essential were truly the ones that were open to the public, and again, to ensure our people's safety. And we also had worked with our Port Authority of Guam and our Customs and Quarantine team to issue temporary permits so that way there wouldn't be a backlog of vehicles at our port, and we could continue to do commerce at our port. And so these are what we believed we wanted to highlight for you, Senators, so that way you're aware of some of our accomplishments and the things that we have been doing at the Department of Revenue and Taxation. And so if you'll come to, please move to our next slide. And so With that, Mr. Chair, I would like to just say thank you again, Sidus Maasi, to you, Mr. Chair, to our Oversight Chair, Senator Sabina Perez, to the Speaker of the Legislature as well, and to all of the honorable senators here and also those who may not have been able to attend, for your continued support of the Department of Revenue and Taxation. I would also like to recognize and say Sidus Maasi to our team at Reven Tax, to our Deputy Director, Mrs. Michelle Santos, our Chief of Administration for being here and for working on this budget with us, and to our entire team at DRT for their hard work and their commitment to our people to continue to support our people and to ensure that always as we do work, we always have the best interests of our people in mind. So I want to thank our team, and again, I want to say Sidus Maasi again to you, Mr. Chair. And with that, we say thank you, and that concludes our presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Shimizu. I have a few questions I would like to ask you, and I'd like to first, number one, before I even state that, I'd like to thank you and the employees at the Department of Revenue and Taxation. You guys are doing an excellent job, and maybe some people says I'm biased because I'm a former employee of Revenue and Tax, but that's okay, because I'm also a former police officer, and I like it in blue, and up there at Revenue and Tax, it's all about green. It's all about money. And that department is the heart of the government of Guam. If it wasn't for Department of Revenue and Taxation, I don't know how we're going to be able to fund every agency, and for every oversight chair wants to scream about money. If Revenue and Tax don't get the tools, don't expect too much money. But with that note, I'd like to ask you a few questions, but I'd like to also recognize that you've already recognized the Speaker Tina has joined us, and also Senator Lee, Regine Besculi is here also. A few questions. Based on the report provided by the governor regarding the coronavirus relief funds, DRT was approved funding of over $6 million. Can you please explain what the funds will be utilized for, and how will this assistance impact your request for FY 2021, if any?
Absolutely, and Sidus Maasi, Mr. Chair, for asking that question. We have actually, since the coronavirus relief budget was issued, and actually even prior to that, of course, one, I wanted to say thank you to Governor and Lieutenant Governor for, making it a priority to assign or allocate monies to the Department of Revenue and Taxation for the enhancement of our system. And so some things that we actually, again, have begun to talk with OTEC. We've probably been in discussion with them over a month now in terms of what we are intending to do. Of course, we want to make sure that in everything that we do, we work to adapt to what is called this new normal, and we work to flatten the curve and, of course, to save lives. And the way that we believe that we're going to be able to do that is, of course, to make sure that as much as possible, we move to doing more things online, to doing more things electronically. And so, again, those are things that we've been actively working on. And in terms of the budget, again, as I mentioned, of course, there was monies that was allocated or indicated in the coronavirus relief budget, and that amount was for DRT. I believe it was $6 million, in addition to, of course, doing some retrofitting of our building, which I believe was about $46,000. So that's the total amount that was put into the coronavirus relief budget for Reven Tax.
Okay, so how far are you so far with OTEC on getting the upgrade of technology at DRT?
Okay, so what we have done is we actually have met with OTEC to identify specifically what the items are. I actually have, OTEC has, the Office of Technology actually has developed a form for, submission for those departments and agencies that are going to be endeavoring to take on projects that are related to the coronavirus relief monies. And so that's something I actually put together a draft of it, and I shared it with Frank Lujan already. And so, again, we've been ongoing and discussing. I believe that we're in a good position because we've already pretty much identified in those specific items that we want to focus on, of course, knowing that we have a short amount of time in which to try to turn this around.
All right, okay. I would just ask that you go after OTEC and you tell them what you just reinforce what you need, and tell them or ask them, do you need you to do the RFP? Then do it. If they're going to do it, then they need to do it a lot faster, because December, the end of this year, if you don't commit the money, you won't have the money. You all know this when it deals with money. Moving along, does your department have any outstanding employees' salary payment as a result of the Competitive Wage Act of 2014? And if so, how many employees and what is the status of their payments? And if it's not in reference to the Competitive Wage Act, any retro pay that's due. And the reason why I say this because in Public Law 3536, we authorize the department to liquidate any such obligation. So whatever the reasons are, I'd like to just ask if you've got, and if you have, how soon can you liquidate it and be done with it?
Edmond Villanueva, Revenue and Tax, COA. Right now, sir, regarding the Competitive Wage Act of 2014, we have 22 positions that were affected in that. And DOA has provided us an estimated cost impact for about $52,000. But you understand this is only basic, and they're still going to be involved, like if they work overtime.
Okay.
If they work overtime and increment, that's going to be factored in. So that this 52,000 is going to probably go up more in the amount.
All right. But Edmund, I'm not really concerned truly about the amount. I'm more concerned about the action taking place. The employees, it's like any agency or any private industry. If you don't make the employee whole, pay them what they're due, and pay them timely, if they leave, you know what they say, right? In California, the second best thing to a lottery is suing. And if we want to wait for somebody to sue, they don't need to win a lottery in Guam, which we don't have. They would get their money. And I just don't want us to be caught in that predicament, Ed.
We're currently working with BBMAR regarding, and we're in the processing and cutting the GG1 for this, sir.
All right, thank you. That's really what I wanted to hear because you do have some folks, and I do get texts and so forth from all the employees, and I want to make sure that we get them wrapped up and taken care of. Okay, Ms. Shimizu, how are your collection efforts with COVID? Have you planned any new collection efforts for 2021?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with regards to collection efforts, of course, we do follow the IRS, and the IRS actually, during the public health emergency, they did issue what they called information on their People's First initiative. With regards to collection efforts, of course, and if you will refer to our Volume 4, we, as a side note, Reven Tax has issued guidance throughout this public health emergency so that we can provide the community with information on our services and things like that. And you can find that at our websites, guamtax.com and myguamtax.com. And we're up to our 4th volume of the COVID-19 series. Now, with regards to collections, what we did, Mr. Chair, during the public health emergency, of course, we had people who were not able to work. They were not able to make payments on their basic bills. And so if you'll look at our guidance that was provided, again, in Volume 4, we do reference collections. Of course, when we did open up again on May 18, we did advise the public through our guidance that there is an expectation that either they come in to make payments or that they are able to that they do reach out to us so that we can meet with them to discuss if there is a need to assist or make some consideration. If there is a need for consideration with regards to their accounts, if they had outstanding. But just so one, I want to say thank you to the Treasurer of Guam themselves because, they were open throughout the public health emergency. For a period, we did have a collection agent housed at the ITC building at the Treasurer of Guam so that way we could continue to collect on all outstanding past due taxes. And so we did have someone there until the time that we opened up. In addition to that, we did, even during the public health emergency, which is unlike what the IRS was doing, we actually did have people who were coming into the office to open up mail. And so we were making sure during this entire public health emergency that we continue to, of course, make deposits of all of the payments that were coming in the mail. And that continued to happen throughout the public health emergency. Again, Reven tax, our charge is collections. We need to make sure we collect, and we, even through the public health emergency, recognize the importance of that, of course, for our people and our government. And so we have continued to collect, even again, during the public health emergency. And now that the public health emergency, allowed for us to open up in PCOR 2, we're working with our taxpayers to ensure that we're continuing to collect. Again, obviously, coming into FY 2021, we're going to make sure that we continue to collect, and of course, taking into consideration, though, the fact that, again, we have many people who have lost their jobs and who, of course, are in need. And so, we are working to balance that out. And again, as always, though, I think from the start of our administration, we have mentioned that, our charge, again, is to collect. We're going to do our best to collect, but we always have encouraged taxpayers to please come, and work with us. And we will do our best to work with our taxpayers to help them to get into compliance, because at the end of the day, we are here and we're public servants. So, it's always been our charge to serve, and, we continue to serve in that way, again, to work with our taxpayers, to do our best to help them, again, not only to collect on taxes, but to help them to get into compliance so that the stress involved in, having to pay taxes or have outstanding taxes due to the government is also minimized.
All right, thank you. Ms. Shimizu, as I remember correctly, in the past few months, you gave extension for driver's license and registration. I'm concerned about business license and real property taxes. Were there any waivers of interest and penalties? Because during the period of the COVID, everybody was shut down, and as much as people wanted to show up, I think it was March, April was the first payment, or the second payment for real property tax and people that need to renew their license. I know they got extension, but were there any waivers or is it possible that waivers of interest and penalties can be applied so that, as you stated, trying to get everybody in compliance, get everybody up to date, catching up with interest and penalties, it's like chasing down, the rabbit down at a Greyhound racetrack. So I'm just very curious on are there anything in motion with the department to assist our people of Guam out there?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Again, our people have always been at the forefront of all we do, and we really do our best to make sure our people are put first. And when we issued our guidance, most recently we issued our Volume 4 on June 17. Again, you can find it on our website. And in our Volume 4, you'll find that for business licenses, we did extend the validity of licenses. And again, I can kind of go through this really quickly. We did work on extending, of course, our driver's licenses, the validity of driver's licenses. So for those driver's licenses which expired from March 16 through August 31, all late fees will be waived as long as renewal is done by September 4. For driver's licenses which expired prior to March 16, late fees for the period from March 16 to August 31 will be waived as long as renewal is done by September 4. And also, though, we do indicate that for any expiration, which is a year or more, the law does require people to take a written exam. So, please be mindful if your driver's license is over a year, you're going to have to retake the written exam. For vehicle registration, again, these are all in our Volume 4. You can find on our website in our COVID-19 section. For vehicle registrations expiring in March, April, May, and June 2020, those are considered to be valid, and those are extended through July 31, 2020. Late fees for those will be waived for the period as long as renewal is done by August 3. In terms of business licenses, really quickly, here, excuse me. So for business licenses which expired in March, April, May, and June 2020, those were extended through July 31, 2020, with penalties being waived for the period of March 16 through July 31, as long as renewal is done by August 3. And so, again, Mr. Chair, making sure that our people know that, again, they're really at the forefront and that we're taking into consideration the fact that we're in this public health emergency. We did take the liberty of putting together guidance so that we can make sure our people know, that they don't have to, at least for the period of the public health emergency, that there's some reasonable consideration that's taken into consideration to ensure that, of course, they're not having to rush to Reven Tax to try to get these items. In addition, of course, Mr. Chair, you know, we did begin last Saturday to open up at the Belgrade office for driver's license services. So, you know, of course, we didn't anticipate that there would be that huge demand that we had, but our team was there past 7 o'clock p.m., even though there were some of them that were there even at 5, as early as 5 in the morning. And so, you know, again, our commitment to take care of our people during this public health emergency, and actually always is very critical to us, but, you know, has been increasingly challenging, especially now, because, you know, of course, we do not want to expose not only our employees, but also, you know, our people who come to Reven Tax to receive services. We want to try to reduce the possibility of them being exposed to this novel coronavirus, you know, which still really exists, you know, again, you know, and it is something that is still, that we still fear, you know, of course, could spread again if we don't take proper measures. So that's what we've done, sir. And again, you can find this at our COVID-19 section of our websites.
All right, thank you. Thank you for making that statement so that the people of Guam that are watching will be reminded to go to your website and pull it up. And maybe I'll get less texts, but that's okay. I still welcome all the texts and the messages from the people of Guam. You have 33 vacant positions, equates to $710,000. What are your plans on filling those positions? Because I know the COVID threw a curveball on everybody, but you have 33 positions, and I know you're running your people are dedicated, they're loyal, but they're gonna get burned out. I'm just concerned about the 33 vacancies you have. When do you plan on sending the GG ones and getting them processed and getting them interviewed and getting them hired? Because I know Edmund's been wanting to do that even when I was there. He wanted to fill all the positions, but it took forever. So hopefully you can answer that today.
Well, I mean, just kind of, I can go ahead and have Edmund maybe talk a little bit about the details, and I can provide a summary.
All right, I just want to know the general is what are you looking at doing and how much further? The year's going to end real soon, okay? So that's what I'm concerned.
We did send out about 28 GG1s, composed of 28 positions. And the status of those positions right now, sir, is we've filled 9 positions, 5 pending selection, 2 pending reannouncement, and 12 are pending certification from DOA. As of yesterday, too, the 3 were referred to us by DOA for scheduled for interview. So right now, we filled 9, 5 pending selection, 2 pending reannouncement, and 12 pending certification from DOA.
Okay, great. We're getting close to the 33.
And may I just update really quickly, just as an update to that, you know, our team is continuing to conduct interviews as well. I was already advised that, you know, this coming week we'll be conducting interviews. So we're working to actively fill positions because, yes, Mr. Chair, we do recognize that our team is in need of additional assistance in terms of headcount, and, you know, these additional personnel will be greatly, you know, they're greatly needed and also greatly welcome.
Yes, thank you. Will the department be returning back to sending out business license notices? You know, they used to do that before, but then all of a sudden they stopped. And one of the excuses when I was there was that they were going to save money, but all they did was cause headache to all the businesses because they're like, you had them packed in during those periods. And a lot of folks don't realize that there are certain branches in the department they got to clear, you know, collection, income, the whole bunch of branches. And if they don't get the notice, I hate to put it this way, but a lot of the businesses, as much as they should be more mindful of how they update or renew their license, but, you know, they kind of like, they need the notice. And if they get the notice and it's only going to cost, like, I think it was something like $10,000, $15,000. When you're bringing in almost $1 million, I mean, I think it makes more sense. Spend that little, get the biggest bang, and it just helps you be more efficient. And I'm hoping that if you do start the business license notices, because you're after upgrading technology, maybe they can find out how they can make sure they're up to date on their income tax all online, and I'm hoping maybe you can answer that question.
Okay, so absolutely, Mr. Chair. Regarding business licenses, and in particular business license renewals and those businesses that are, have collection issues, what's really great is we do already have a system for renewing business licenses online. And if you go to our website again, you'll be able to do so. Now, the only time a business will not be able to do so, or in general, the times that business licenses will not be able to renew online is when there are clearance issues. And so, again, for those businesses that are up to date and they don't have any outstanding issues, collections, and other matters, they're going to be able to, in general, file or renew online. And the great thing about that is once you renew your business license online, you actually get a PDF copy of your business license, and you can go ahead and utilize that instead of waiting to get the printed copy from Reven Tax, or even having to, go to the Reven Tax and walk through the line and, go back and forth from the business license section to the cashier and back to get your actual printed copy. So there is already a mechanism for, determining that. Again, if you get online and you're not able to renew, it will indicate, I'm not sure if it indicates specifically if you have a licensing issue, but it will not renew if you have an outstanding balance due.
All right, thank you. Two more questions I have. In this year's budget, we appropriated $150 for a tax attorney. And I don't even know if that's even the salary that you need, or maybe even more. But and I know that the Attorney General's office has been assisting the department. Have you been lucky enough, and I say lucky because there's not that many attorneys around. Have you been lucky enough to find a tax attorney on Guam or anywhere that is willing to come on board for $150,000, ma'am?
Well, we have actively been, trying to find an attorney over the last year. That's something that's very important for an agency such as ours, which has so many regulatory functions. Legal team is very important. We're thankful to Attorney General Camacho, CDAG, Taitno as well. They've been very critical in assisting us as we have moved forward. Also, of course, we have been able to tap into as well the Governor's Office legal counsels who have been as well, assisting in certain matters. But, we haven't been successful in recruitment for an attorney. We do intend to issue an RFP, though, for legal services. That's something, again, we're really in need of legal services, again, because of the significant amount of regulatory matters and legal matters. It's very important. But it is difficult, Mr. Chair, to find someone, of course, with a tax background specifically. As you know, in terms of I guess legal certifications, generally people look for an LLM or somebody who has an LLM in tax. And then I can't even tell you what LLM means. I think it's like in Latin. But, that is a very difficult credential to find. I think locally, probably we have only a handful of people that actually have that designation. But, we have been actively, looking. I'll tell you, even when I have traveled, for example, in other places, I've tried to reach out to, different people who may know other people in maybe AG's offices or in other departments of revenue throughout the nation to find out whether or not they may be interested. And of course, I do have to share with them the cap of like $150,000 inclusive of benefits. And I'm not sure if that's the reason why there hasn't been any type of interest, but I'm not sure if it's just perhaps just a lack of that resource just in general. But we have been working to actively pursue. We're going to continue, and in fact, we're again taking measures to hopefully be able to issue an RFP for legal services very soon.
All right. One final question, or maybe leading to the final question, is space. I understand you do have a driver's license outlet at a Gani shopping center. I don't know if you're going to stay there, but I'm just concerned because many of the people of Guam, you did this on the weekend. You did your driver's license bonanza up there, and that was, God, you had more people than they normally would have in a carnival. But you know what? The people of Guam appreciate when you have your outlets. You're already supporting the business license one-stop. I would honestly believe that the people of Guam would love to see if Revenue and Tax had a driver's license, revenue, registration, and business license outlet out there. Because, not everybody's gonna, it's just a renewal. They don't need to get the full permit like you do the one-stop. But if folks can go out there, and then at the same token, when it comes to filing taxes, those same outlets can actually be a receiving end of turning in your income tax without payment. And I'm just curious that I in the past, the previous administration, I asked them, and I was the oversight, and I'm just surprised your budget only asked for $200,000. 1 year we gave them 1.8, and they wasted it. You're asking only for $200,000, and I'm just surprised that it's that little. When I know for a fact you're going to need a little bit more, but that we can discuss later separately and with your oversight chair, because you're the heart of the GovGuam, and I'm curious about space you got. If you get to hire all 33, you're going to be in trouble. You won't be able to allow the people of Guam, or much of them, to come in your building, because you're going to be strapped with the social distancing. So I'm just concerned is that, and I don't know if it's in your budget, and I doubt it is, if you ask for additional money so you can start your so-called driver's license and other outlets out there to expand your operation. Please, ma'am, if you can answer that.
Okay, so with regards to, trying to, I guess, looking at different opportunities for perhaps expansion into other areas, we have within our office already begun to discuss, the potential of decentralizing some of our branches. As you know, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, even while you were at Reven Tax, we do have some very high traffic groups, in particular our vehicle registration and our driver's license groups. Those are probably our highest traffic groups on a regular basis. So we've been in discussion, of course, with DPW for some assistance on this matter. Again, we've been talking about trying to decentralize. We haven't finalized our final plan regarding that, but we're, again, planning on trying to move out at least one of our branches very soon, and DPW has worked or has indicated their interest in assisting us, and we thank them for that. And so, again, we're intending to do that. We have been at the Aganya Shopping Center for a bit, and I believe that people tend to like that location because it is central and the parking is generally good. But, again, in spite of that, we are still continuing to look at other options, to better serve our people.
All right, thank you. I'll now ask the Oversight Chair if she has any question. Senator Sabina Perez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Daphne and Edmund, and thank you to all the Department of Revenue and Taxation folks that have worked so hard during this pandemic. I imagine it was such a huge task to not only deal with the tax refunds, but also with the economic stimulus. That was a huge effort, and so thank you to you and all your staff. So, I echo many of the sentiments of the chair here regarding, IT needs as well as manpower, and I'm glad he covered a lot of those questions. In regards to IT, and it's good to hear that you are collaborating with other agencies such as OTEC, but we had Customs and Quarantine here a couple of days ago, and they were talking about investing in a platform that can help increase use tax collections. Are you at all involved in that conversation with getting that particular IT infrastructure that you can connect to, perhaps?
Thank you, Senator Perez, for that question. Regarding the system for CQA, we actually have, since the release of the public auditor's audit on use tax in the last year, we actually began to discuss with CQA, of course, use tax and use tax collections. Really, it's mandated in the mandate is really that, of course, the collections of use tax is a responsibility of the Customs and Quarantine. However, because of the current use tax law, which does allow for the use taxes to be paid in the months subsequent, if there are any payments that are not received, at the point of origin or the point of entry into Guam, then those use tax forms, get transmitted to Reven Tax, and then those taxes, of course, are worked to be collected by our agency. And so, I have actively been involved in discussions with Customs on some of what they're planning to do with UST, and also I have worked with and discussed even as well with our counterparts in the Cnmi to discuss as well like what type of system that they have and currently in place and how we might be able to tap into some of their their expertise in that area because they do have a system there. But I haven't talked with Director Pareto very recently regarding the actual system that they're trying to procure, but we have actively been talking, prior to, of course, the public health emergency on the type of system that will be needed. And again, because on the back end, it's important that Reven tax somehow is connected because, ultimately we work to collect on those taxes.
And do you have the manpower, should that be available? Is the manpower there for you to support that? In this budget, do you have the manpower available to support that effort?
With regards to, I'm not sure how long it will take to actually procure a system and to get it up and running. In terms of our current budget, we hadn't contemplated, of course, any of the needs that would come about for CQA in terms of trying to get those. But we have, of course, our group that works to collect on that is the individual that works to collect on that is housed in our BPT branch, our business privilege tax branch. We've been, actively working to collect on use taxes, and whether there is a system or not, DRT will do our best always to make sure that we work to collect. But we believe that the procurement of a system for CQA is very critical, and that will definitely kind of help to head us in the right direction so that we are more efficient in terms of collections, and so that way, on the back end, when, it's time for DRT to step in to collect, that, it actually will be easier, because right now we do have, several boxes of UST actual forms, the use tax forms, that have to be processed so that we can actually work to collect or send notices to taxpayers and make sure we collect on them. So, we believe that that's a very important piece of, what CQA has to implement. And again, we have not, in particular, taken that into consideration in terms of our own manpower, though.
Thank you, Daphne. So, in regards to the IT needs of the agency, so there's been a lot of talk about how, there's no lack of connectivity with like Department of Land Management, and other government agencies. Have you assessed, considering this pandemic has kind of provided this new norm for us where we have to assess how to do business with social distancing, have you assessed how you're going to move forward using technology to kind of streamline some of these processes and to help provide social distancing?
Sure. So regarding, connectivity to land management, and actually connectivity in general, maybe I can go back to even our business license permit center. One thing that has been an initiative, is for us to work to get to a system where we don't necessarily have to have, individuals have to physically come in to fill out applications, and also to work to get clearances, or even to schedule, for certain appointments that they have to, for inspections and other things if they're going to get a business license. So in that particular area, that's one area which perhaps might be small, but we're, at least the agencies within the Business License Permit Center would have some level of connectivity, so that way, again, from the time that an application is received for business licenses, the information there can be somehow transmitted to the next agency when it's time for clearance and so forth. So, again, that's important. To go back to the issue with land management, I believe that there was an ongoing issue even prior to, I'd like to say prior to me coming into the Department of Revenue and Taxation. That's something that Director Borja and I have met on, and our teams have continued to meet on. I actually don't have an update on that, ma'am, so I would have to get back to you on that particular issue. But, we, again, to go back to the question of connectivity, I think that, even at the level of the Business License Permit Center, which houses about probably 7, 8, or 8 agencies, we've already begun to talk about how we might be able to streamline the process so that, there's some level of connectivity between the agencies, and so that people don't have to, physically, enter information on a piece of paper and have to transmit that, or you maybe physically have to go in where perhaps, the agencies themselves can, perhaps get a tickler of all of the individuals or businesses that are ready to be inspected, and then, they're able to somehow get those appointments done online. So we've been talking about that. There's, with regards to technology, there's so many different things that we have been looking at and trying to do. We're trying to, of course, focus our efforts on those that we believe are most urgent, because, of course, we have kind of a short period of time within which to try to get some of these programs stood up. But yes, we do have thought about connectivity, and those are discussions that we have had.
So with the CARES funding, so I believe there was $6 million. Is there still money available that you can utilize for this particular type of effort or project?
With regards to the management of the entire, the entire coronavirus relief fund budget, that's something that, of course, BBMR, I believe, is the one that manages. I'm not aware of there being an adjustment to our particular request or the amount that was allocated to Department of Revenue and Taxation. But, of course, I have been assured, of course, by BBMR, that we'll continue to work with them on the use of the coronavirus relief monies. And so I'm not familiar with that, ma'am.
So you don't have anything so far as CARES money goes. Is there still money there for you to utilize, or has it been expended fully?
So to go back to what Reven Tax administers, of course, we administer the Economic Impact Payment Program, and there was monies that was transferred to Guam from the U.S. Treasury for the program and for the payments of EIP. And that money is separate from the, I believe, $117 million that is for the Coronavirus Relief Fund. And those monies are, they're actually, again, I believe, managed by the Bureau of Budget and Management Research, which did submit a budget to the legislature a month or so ago. So I'm not familiar with the balance of what is in the Coronavirus Relief Fund.
So I also want to question something about there's a Aumentum Tax and Provo Plus software subscription that's in your budget request. So it's in two parts in the 2020 budget. One is under the directors, and another part is under insurance and banking. So that's for the 2020 budget. I believe in the director's budget it stated 92,000, roughly about 92,000, and in the banking and insurance, it was listed as about 300-some thousand. But in this year's budget, it's listed under banking and insurance under about 390,000. So normally when money's expended under the banking insurance, it would have to be approved by the board. So are there minutes to show that this was approved?
For budget purposes, we went ahead and allocated down to banking insurance. But when the PO gets caught, ma'am, is that we're gonna get reimbursed as soon as the funds released on the other general fund.
Okay. Yeah, but the question is there minutes to show that it's been approved by the board?
No, ma'am. I believe that was, I guess, basically allocated, and perhaps if there is a need for us to have the board meet so that that can be brought before them, then that will have to happen. But as far as I know, that has not happened, and there are no minutes related to that.
Okay. So the other question is, are employees allowed to telework?
Yes, and thank you for that question. And in fact, that's something that we're always looking at is opportunities for us to have people telework. And of course, Chairman Agustin did mention, of course, the importance of our space, and it's prime space now because we're trying to make sure that we manage the number of people in our agency. Some people do telework. I also telework at times, and most especially during the public health emergency when we were closed, there was a need to. You know what, for the most part though, Senator Perez, our team is probably almost 100% kind of reporting to work at this time. We did try to manage the space and of course the social distancing efforts through trying to do things like, you call them bubbles. So for example, we would have a 14-day bubble where we would have one group that would work and then another group that was off. But we found that that wasn't, in terms of operations, it was not working because, you know, it was a little bit frustrating for our teams to not be able to have consistent time to be able to work on their cases or projects. And so, you know, at the request of, you know, some of the managers, we have stopped doing this bubbling, or we have actually, again, the majority, almost 100% of our team is actually actively reporting to work. And so, you know, although that there are still some people who do, and there is a need, if they are out and they have to still work on certain projects, or we have to call on them to do certain things, then there may be those instances.
Thank you. And then in regards to the cigarette tax stamp law, yeah, I know there was an audit that, you know, the auditor did regarding the cigarette tax stamps. And so what is the status of that? Do you have enough staff to implement this and a budget to implement this in-house?
Okay, so with regards to the cigarette stamp tax, which was, I believe, enacted in 2015 or so, do you know, of course, that has not been implemented since the time it was enacted. We actually did recently have a meeting with the Office of the Attorney General, Reven tax teams, so that we can talk about this cigarette stamp tax. One of the main issues which we have inquired with the Office of the Attorney General on was, to go back to it, in terms of the implementation, it's my understanding, based on discussions with the OAG's office and also with our team, that you know, it went unfunded, and because it was unfunded, you know, we were not able to implement. However, something that has come to our attention, and which we in this late last year did request for some input from the Attorney General's offices on whether, and we believe at DRT that really there are two taxes that exist and that are on the books for cigarettes, and that is the cigarette stamp tax, and then the regular cigarette tax. And so we wanted to get some clarification from the AG's office on whether or not those two exist simultaneously. You know, I was not in the position that I am at the time that the cigarette stamp tax was mandated or enacted, so I can't say, but you know, that was one of the larger concerns that we had. Again, is you know, was it the legislature at that time's intent, or that both taxes should exist simultaneously? And again, that's something that we have asked the AG's office to weigh in on. Regarding cigarette stamp taxes and how that operates, of course, you know, our team has, you know, again, we've been in discussion with the Office of the Attorney General. You know, there would be a need for, you know, people to do some regulation on that. We did have some additional headcount that we did put in our regulatory section in this last year, not only for cannabis regulation as well, because our regulatory team will also be working to regulate on, you know, the cannabis laws, the recreational cannabis laws once those are enacted. But you know, again, that same team is the one that also works with our business privilege tax team when there's any regulation or enforcement. And so, you know, the hope is that those additional 4 positions perhaps would be able to you know, take on the responsibility of both the, you know, whatever, again, that particular group is mandated to do.
And how much staff is that, estimate?
Well, in our budget, I believe in the prior year and this year, we have requested for, 4 additional regulatory people. I don't have the full head count of that, and maybe if Mr. Villanueva can check that.
And if you can provide that, or if you have it readily available, that's.
Right now, ma'am, the insurance and banking section, there's about 2 regulatory examiner 2, 1 regulatory examiner supervisor, and 3 regulatory examiner 1, and there's 1 vacancy right now. We're recruiting 1 vacant for a total of about, 7 FTEs. And on compliance branch, there's about 10 FTE compliance branch, and they have, out of the 10, there's 4 vacancies that we're recruiting right now
Okay, all right,
in the
thank you.
compliance branch.
Thank you for that response. Just a couple more questions. So in regards to procurement training, so there was another audit that was done, and many of the agencies are lacking in the proper training. So what's the status of procurement training in your agency? How many have actually completed the 4 modules at GCC? Because that's required to do RFPs, right? And considering that you have RFP activity upcoming, are there anybody, there should be at least, I believe, 3 people in an agency to have accomplished this. I know they're starting up another round of trainings at GCC.
Thank you, Senator. And I'm actually looking forward to being able to take the procurement training because I have not been able to, for some reason, get into the classes. I believe that they get filled very quickly, and so we've not been able to fill that. I'm sorry, I've not been able to get into one. But I know that our deputy director has taken the class, but prior to us, of course, coming in 2019. I'm not sure if there is anybody else who has taken the course. I will have to defer to our Chief of Administration.
No. The last time we did is that by the time we submit the request and the payment, it's already booked. Yeah, it gets booked fast when it comes to the procurement thing.
Yeah, according to law, that if you're doing procurement activity, you're not able to if you haven't fulfilled the training requirements. So this is an issue that I think needs to be prioritized, I feel. Did you set aside funding for that, for procurement training?
I'm not sure if there's specific funding, Senator, but I know we do have a little bit money in miscellaneous, and this is something as well that has been important for me personally. But again, you know what? I really do have to say that each time that the class has has come open, I have done my best. I've even asked if we can perhaps pay in advance or do some type of other thing like that so that we would be able to get into the course. I have tried, and I just have not been successful. I believe that we've even communicated with the Guam Community College on this matter, so that way perhaps they might be able to open up additional courses or additional slots for some of their classes. So, you know, we absolutely agree that the classes are very important, but unfortunately, it hasn't been something that we've been able to do, and not for lack of us, you know, making efforts. I think I tried like 3 times personally, well, not personally, but our team has tried 3 times to get me in particular and our team into some classes and have been unsuccessful. You know, and so, you know, eventually we did have some people in our agency reach out to GCC directly and to some of the employees there to ask how we might be able to do this. So, you know, we agree it's very important. Unfortunately, we've not been able to get into the course, but it's something that even as we've gotten back to work in this past May 18 when we began operating again, we've already begun to discuss, ma'am, is that we want to make sure that we comply with the law, and we want to make sure that we get our people trained.
Thank you, Daphne. Just maybe 2 more questions. About limited term appointments. Has there been movement to try to permanize some of these employees that perhaps learned on the job for a year or more?
Sure. So regarding, you know, people who are limited term, you know, we have since even prior to the beginning of this fiscal year, of course, fiscal year 2020, we have discussed hiring and making sure that we really evaluate our workforce. Not only work to permanize people who are on limited term, but work to assist, and to provide opportunities for people who have been at our agency for many years to have the opportunity to also grow and to move up. And so as a strategy, we had, of course, worked since, again, I'd like to say since even prior to this particular fiscal year beginning, we had been discussing, working to get positions open. I believe it just took a little bit of time for us to actually be able to get the announcements and, of course, get together the list and to get, people, the list to be sent over. But, we have actually actively, again, not only been working to try to make sure that we permanize people, as appropriate, but also that we work to allow for our people to grow, most especially, those that have worked very hard and have, communicated to us about, their desire to grow. And the one thing that's really important for us is we want to make sure that we give our people the opportunity to grow within our agency, so we don't lose, our people to other places because we're not able to provide them with that opportunity. So, as a strategy, absolutely, our people, not only our people of Guam, but our people as well, and within our agency are hugely important. Human resources, the focus on people is very important, and making sure that we meet their needs. To kind of go back to our strategy and how we've tried to work to address things. When we came in to the department, we made sure that we met with our different branches and we talked to them about the things that were important to them and about the things that they were hoping to see when we began our administration. And some of the things that they hoped to see were training. And also, again, as you mentioned, the opportunity for permanization and the opportunity for growth. In this past year, as I mentioned, and we showed in our PowerPoint presentation, we were able to do 2 trainings, one of which we hadn't had, in over half of a decade, and the other which we haven't had the opportunity to do or we hadn't done in over 2 decades. And so, that I think is a testament to our commitment in terms of our management's commitment to our people at our agency, and that's something we're continuing to do. I think also the fact, ma'am, that we're continuing to interview as well. And again, I was just advised that we have several interviews scheduled over the next week or so. That again is a testament to our commitment to our team, to our, to making sure that we take care of our human resources, and that we continue to, again, we want to give people that opportunity to grow.
Thank you, Daphne, and thank you, Edmund. I have no doubt about your commitment, and it's just tremendous the amount of work that you've done, and I'm truly grateful for everything that you're doing, and for sticking it out and persisting through this all. So, this is Masi. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Perez. I just want to make one thing very clear. Ms. Shimizu, you get a lump sum budget. How you disperse it is your call. If there's an urgency and there's a priority, do so, okay? That's one. Number 2, in reference to limited employees, I just want to make sure I remind everybody, if you're not familiar or how limited term employees are, when they're at any agency, they're not part of the agency. So they have to qualify like anybody else. And the reason why I state this, because with my term at Reven and Tax, and Edmund knows, we've seen people there for 10 years. The only sad part is that when they come to the opening, unfortunately, I wish they could, they didn't qualify. Or they did qualify, but they didn't meet the threshold of the others that are applying. Because I would wish that everyone that's been limited term at Reven and Tax has gone to the different trainings could get hired, because they're assets. But
to that point, Mr. Chair, I just want to share as well that we have actually looked at certain positions where we have had people as limited term and who have had people who have been in positions for years who are still not, when they, I guess, work to get somehow
Yep.
certified, they end up not being qualified. That was
Understood.
something we work with, especially one particular area in our vehicle area. So we make sure that, of course, if people, and it is, I think, appropriate, at times to go back and to review job descriptions. So we've actually worked with the Department of Administration, and I was assured by our Chief of Administration that in certain areas, we have looked at, of course, job descriptions, make sure that they really match what the job is, because as you know, Mr. Chair, through the years, we have morphed into certain things where we may be called a driver's license examiner, we don't actually do the exam anymore, right? And so there are positions like that where there is a need to adjust perhaps the job description, because although it was relevant, maybe when I was a teenager, many years ago, it may not be relevant at this time, right? Because again, Reven tax has changed throughout the years, and our functions, like for example, the written exam, is no longer administered by our agency, of course, it's administered by another. And so, we have looked at things like that, and I'm thankful to our supervisors and managers who have brought these to our attention, so that we can make sure we address them.
Yes, please, please take care of them. Madam Speaker, you're next, and you'll be followed by, because the line is shorter on the left, Senator Torres, and then walking across Senator Taitigui, and then Senator Terlai, and then down to Senator Lee. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Sizus Masi, Mr. Chair, Manana Sizus. Thank you, Mrs. Shimizu and Mr. Edmond, for your presentation, and truly appreciating the work that your committee and your team from DRT has presented. Excellent work. As you were sharing your presentation and your request for 12.498 million, which is a measly increase, I'm looking at how conservative, very conservative, this budget is. And like the chair said, someone who brings in and responsible for bringing in all the money for the majority of our money to our government, I have to say that this very conservative budget really truly humbles me with all the work that you guys do. And I just want to say I applaud your efforts with your team at DRT for the services that you provide. And as both the chair and the oversight chair has asked some of the questions that I was very interested in, especially as it relates to automation and the tobacco stamp collection. I know that, or you know that I'm very interested in working and continuing to work on providing more efficiencies and more follow-up and providing the necessary tools that you're going to need. So with your presentation, Mrs. Shimizu, you spoke about, Ms. Daphne, you spoke about the tax collection enforcement, and I saw the budget highlight proposed request, and I just wanted to make sure that I heard this correctly. The provision that works with passport, is that a part of the passport? Was that the request of 426,000? Is that, you had mentioned passport?
Yes, ma'am.
As it relates to that?
Yes, ma'am. And so if you'll look at our budget digest summary for fiscal year 2021, it's at the top left, it says General Government, Department or Agency, Revenue and Taxation, and then Program Summary.
Right.
And that section at the bottom of the page, ma'am, you will see that if you see note number 2, it indicates Tax Collection Enhancement Fund of $919,948, Better Public Service Fund of $1,563,291, and Banking and Insurance Enforcement Fund of $479,765. So in addition to the general fund, there are also these additional funds. The Tax Collection Enhancement Fund is the fund, I believe, that is funded out of our passport fees. The Better Public Service Fund is the fund that we get because we do get a percentage of the the revenues from certain of our services. We get a percentage. And then the Banking and Insurance Enforcement Fund, of course, is funded out of our Banking and Insurance group.
So Ms. Daphne, what are you looking from again? Are you looking through the full budget digest?
Yes, ma'am. So if you look at, if you look at our full budget digest, so the first page is, of course, the budget certification. Then we have the fiscal year 2021 proposed budget with the seal of Guam. And then after that, you'll find our agency budget certification. And then the next page is our organizational chart. And I apologize that these are not numbered. Then after that is our department or agency narrative. So right after the department and agency narrative, Madam Speaker, you will find it's a landscape worksheet. And at the top of it, it does say Government of Guam Fiscal Year 2021 Budget Digest. And at the top left, the third item where it says Program, it'll indicate Summary.
Okay, the reason why I'm asking is then how much do you receive, or how much did you receive from the passport collections for the year 2020, or to date? I just want to make sure that we make sure that we capture all the passport fees.
But before you answer that, we need to remind everybody that if I'm correct, 50% of that goes to the DOE for the libraries and the schools.
Right.
Yeah, 50% goes to the Public School Resources Library Fund, and the 50% goes to revenue and tax.
Reven tax.
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that we've captured all those revenues that have come in, because I know that in the recent past, those fees have more than doubled. So I just wanted to make sure, have we received what we have received to date, or at least for the 2019, just so that I can see the comparisons from what I know.
Yes. Actually, BBMR is the one that, following up on the revenue that's coming in from that. And in fact, according to them right now, because of the pandemic thing, that there's no activities going on the passport, everything is freeze. So the actual revenue kind of went down a little bit.
However, Madam Speaker, I do believe that the amount that's indicated, though, in our budget for FY 2021 is consistent with what we have seen in our prior budgets.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure. And also, I'm looking at your accomplishments and your continued efforts on the regulation for bed and breakfast and the short-term vacation rentals, and it brings to mind two things. Has the department been able to separate the identification of both programs, and have we seen, based on Reven tax efforts of going out to making sure that all those pop-up bed and breakfast businesses, that they've actually been recorded to date?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for that question. Regarding bed and breakfast and short-term vacation rentals, our team back in 2019 did begin to work on doing, of course, our own, I guess, operations, so that we can make sure that we identify them, and we, issue notice of violation. We also worked on education. As you know, Madam Speaker, for bed and breakfast, I think that in general there may be some misunderstanding, and perhaps in the public, and what a bed and breakfast is, and probably primarily because there is a platform or a brand called B&B or Airbnb. And so I think that, of course, in discussions not just with my team, but also with other tax administrators within the insular areas, we have discussed, the issue of bed and breakfast. But bed and breakfast is, as it pertains to Guam law, of course, a bed and breakfast itself, you must serve breakfast. Mm-hmm. You must also, you cannot also be like a corporation. You basically have to be like a sole proprietor, right? And that was really because, and if I based on my understanding of the history of the bed and breakfast and STVR law, is that, of course, the B&Bs were meant for, people who maybe have had, they're empty nesters and their kids have gone into college, and so they have additional space, and they want to be able to rent those out. So bed and breakfast, as it pertains to Guam law, is really only can be licensed to basically individuals. It can't be licensed to corporations. And again, you have to meet certain requirements in terms of the size of your bed, the distance of the bed and things like that. But, you know, the great thing I think that we have found, and again, sorry to go back to the B&B and the misunderstanding of B&B, is that, you know, as we have found, we've been able to educate people, because a lot of what we have found is that people were not necessarily not licensed, but a lot of them that even had been reported to Reven Tax as violators, perhaps were just not properly licensed. So where people, you know, there are different types of occupancy type or resident businesses. So you could be an apartment rental, you could be a regular house rental, you can be, sometimes people are even, I guess, you know, can be considered, I'm not sure all of the different types, but short-term vacation rental, and then there's of course B&B, so or bed and breakfast. So, you know, again, you know, we've been working to try to educate. We've seen, of course, people actually be licensed for bed and breakfast, which says that, you know, and again, we didn't have that before because perhaps people, you know, either, you know, they didn't understand. But, you know, it does say something that we have issued notice of violations. That does mean that, you know, there are people who, again, you know, to their defense, may not have known about the law, who we've, of course, had to educate and, of course, have had to penalize because of that.
Yeah, so I want to say thank you for sharing that, but I do want to note to the listening audience that as we look at both on the differences, we know that the bed and breakfast as authored is an 11% assessed tax, and then others are, which is the 5% to date on the BBTs. And I wanted to make sure as we look at the listings from Airbnb and others to that effect, that the number of businesses or businesses that are named on that internet program is still in the hundreds. And I just wanted to make sure that Reven Tax had the listing of all those names that we can look and continue to verify, because that's where we can see that a lot of the taxes that should be coming into the government coffers have been escaped.
Right, ma'am, and thank you, Madam Speaker, again for bringing that up, because, you know, if you do go to the bed and breakfast or the Airbnb website, if you'll notice, they're actually, you know, sorry, as a person who is advertising on the B&B website or the Airbnb website, you know, people are actually allowed multiple listings. I'm not sure if it's up to 16 listings. So, for example, if you have a single home, maybe with 3 or 4 bedrooms, you can, you know, you can rent that out. You can advertise that in many ways. You can advertise it as a whole house. You can advertise it by bedroom. Right. You can advertise it for less than 30 days. You can advertise it for more than 30 days. So there are those, you know, again, although there are a lot of advertisement listings on the Airbnb website, you know, if you, when our team, we tried to, of course, and witnesses might have been duplicated because, again, you know, one house was listed many times. But when we do, to go back to your point on taxes, ma'am, you're right. Of course, there is the occupancy tax, right? That is applied to certain types of rentals. And, you know, when we do work to license and when we do actually inspect with the intention of licensing and making sure that we're licensing properly, because our team actually does go out and does actual physical inspections of a location to determine what is the actual proper way of licensing. We do, you know, make sure that people know, you know, that one, you know, what they're capable of being licensed as based on what they're, you know, wanting to do. Again, whether they're a sole proprietor or not, whether they're serving breakfast or not, whether they're intending to rent for less than 30 days or more than 30 days. Those types of things are things we talk to the licensee about. And then also, of course, their advice as well and given information on, you know, what the proper rate of taxes are for BBT reporting purposes as well.
So I want to say thank you again, yeah, because you know that in one single house, you can rent up to 5 bedrooms, and like you said, the different advertisements and the creativity that can be put into that. But the main take is we've got to make sure as a government that those taxes that are assessed on that, that we recover that, and we want to make sure that we don't lose out on that, because we have, you know, since the program has been initiated, there's been some confusion, and knowing that even the company, the online company, saying, you know, they're willing to work that, and I think that if we can make sure that we look or assess with the agency that the businesses that are listed, we make sure that they have a corresponding business license, because that's where we're missing out on that. So I just want to say that in your efforts and the accomplishments since we introduced the bill in the 33rd Guam legislature, I want to say that at least I'm appreciative that in the term that you've started, that we've gotten much better, and that the businesses know that if they're not properly licensed, that they will literally be fined. And I also want to ask, the oversight chair talked about the automation, and it is my hopes that every program that you have that you listed, that there could be some update on automation, working with OTEC or working with all the different other agencies that need to collaborate together. Has there been any recent automation updates as it relates to all the different programs? You've got licensing, you've got tax, real property, you've got banking, all these different components. Have you literally looked at automation as it relates to upgrading the technology and being able to have a component that all of them can talk to each other? Because as it relates to even work closely, whether it be land management, whether it be public health, whether it be, you know, all the other agencies out there, that they may not be talking to each other.
Right. Thank you again, Madam Speaker. Regarding, again, you know, automation, something that's important for us. You know, one thing that we were able to implement during this public health emergency, and of course out of a need, and as you know, Madam Speaker, you did, I believe, write a letter to me regarding the Form EIP-NF, or the non-filer form, and how, you know, Guam residents were to be addressed in terms of that, because we knew that the IRS had a portal for non-filers. So, you know, of course, even prior to your letter to us, Madam Speaker, our team was already working on not just a manual non-filer form, but already we were working on the implementation of an online EIP-NF, or non-filer form. And that was something we were able to, within, I believe we did it, I'm thinking early May or so, or around May, where we were able to actually, I think, well, first we issued the non-filer form itself, the manual non-filer form, and then we went ahead and we were able to issue or implement the online non-filer form. And what, you know, in terms of, again, efficiency and things like that, those are things that we've been talking with our supervisors about how, you know, again, you know, one piece or one thing, of course, we have a similar charge in terms of tax administration as the Internal Revenue Service, but during this public health emergency, when the IRS campuses were being closed across the nation, one of the main differences that exist between the IRS and our Guam Department of Revenue Taxation is in our infrastructure, you know, and the mechanisms for us to be able to receive all types of forms. And so, you know, when the IRS was shut down, because their infrastructure is such that, you know, well over half of their filings are received online, you know, of course, even when they were shut down, you know, they were able to still get the majority of their filings to be done online. The Department of Revenue and Taxation, you know, historically, of course, prior to the pandemic, we probably had maybe between 1,200 and 1,500, which is like less than 2% of our total Form 1040 filings that were being done online. And so, something that we've been actively working on is to work to do an expansion of our Form 1040, and to do other enhancements so that we're able to have more people to file online. So, even prior to, even on the onset, I suppose, of the pandemic, recognizing, the fact that we wanted to help to protect our people from, again, not just our people in-house, but our people in our island community from this continued spread of the coronavirus. We, had thought about already how we can be, doing things to automate. And one way was, of course, the expansion of our Form 1040, which is something that is an ongoing project with our agency right now. And we are actually, again, continuing to work with our Office of Technology and try to determine, other areas where we may be able to use technology. But absolutely, automation, to your point, Madam Speaker, is something that's very important. And, we'll definitely, take your comments, under advisement, as well as, of course, Senator Perez's under advisement in terms of automation. And again, DRT is committed to working toward that because, again, not only, there's so many reasons why that automation is important. And again, we thank you again for your comments on that.
You're very welcome. And one last question, Mr. Chair, if I may. As it relates to the federal grants, I know that the Oversight Chair talked a little bit about the $6 million that you received from the CARES Act, but I've asked all the agencies about this. Even through the months up to today and the potential lifting of the PCOR 3, there's still a lot of, to PCOR 3, there's still a lot of federal grants out there and resources that our government can literally look and apply for. Has the Department of Revenue and Taxation taken the time, your team taken the time to see what other possible grants as it relates to strengthening or literally rebuilding on what you have today as equipment, on technology and all that? Have you asked for or looked for additional grants that may be out there?
No, Madam Speaker, we actually have not looked for additional grants, but we have been in communication with our federal counterparts who, for example, they advise us on some of the monies that were available, I think through the Coronavirus Relief Fund, some of the monies that were available for the insular areas. But, of the items that they shared with us, there were already, local agencies that were, I guess, in charge of applying for those monies. And so, although we're not actively looking and for that, we have been in communication, at least with our federal counterparts on that matter. And they, of course, do alert us when there is such opportunity that comes up as it relates to our particular area.
Good, and because of that communication, if there's anything, they'll let you know. So I just want to make sure that you guys are in continual contact with your federal counterparts. So thank you very much for your presentation. And again, looking at your presentation, I want to ask the chair to literally support the efforts because this is a really frugal budget request. And when I look at the operations being reduced by 23%, I'm taken aback, like, wow, for an agency that should be asking for much, much more, you guys have been really, really frugal in working in your efforts of making sure that you only ask what you need. So again, to your team and to you, thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity to ask and share my thoughts with Reven Tax.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Torres, do you have any questions, ma'am?
Yes, I wanted to highlight amongst your accomplishments the training that you've undertaken with the federal law enforcement training, sending 4 tax investigators from criminal investigative branch to this training, which hasn't been done in 20 years. That is quite remarkable. In addition to that, you also had collections branch training by the Internal Revenue Service instructors, a 3-week on-island training, which was the first time in 6 years. Once upon a time on Guam, we recall that the Tax Enforcement Division was really the strongest arm of DRT. And with that, people had a responsibility to pay their taxes and met that responsibility. And I think what has been so disheartening in Guam over the past decades is that lack of tax enforcement, where what we see more often than not is the forgiveness of taxes owing that accrued for years and years and years and amounted to so much. And the feeling among many people, especially those honest taxpayers, that they are the ones shouldering the burden oftentimes because the tax evaders take it to such a point and then eventually get forgiven or there's no pursuit of their matters. So with that said, I just want to commend you because I think among all the great things that DRT does, your focus on putting that critical training in for those enforcement officers is the very success of DRT. That is the heart and soul of what's going to make DRT prosper and the island of Guam collect the taxes that are due, and to level the playing field, amongst those that owe taxes and those that owe and defer because there's no enforcement, and those that actually do. But with that, I just want to ask you, do you feel now, given the training that you've had and the vacancies that you're looking to fill, do you feel that the Tax Enforcement Division can once again be a robust division with DRT in the very near future?
Thank you, Senator Torres, for your comments and for your, for recognizing our efforts to take care of our team and make sure that their needs and also their, that they have communicated to us their desire to receive training. Thank you for recognizing that was something that was very important for us, and as well as we came in our administration. In the development of technical competencies is something that is perhaps something that actually gets laid through many years and through many types of training. What we were providing, of course, is just kind of the first step to try to lay the foundation, because in terms of, in particular, our collections officers, who are our collections branch, which is our revenue officer training, those that receive training, this was the first time that these particular people, a lot of them who were already kind of in senior, maybe higher than a level 1 position, was the first time that they had actually received collections training. And that was very important because, we have people who, of course, through their experience, they get the opportunity to move, and we're grateful that they're able to grow, but perhaps aren't given the corresponding resources so that they have an understanding of the not just the piece that they're working on, but of how that relates to the whole collection process and to the law itself. So, I think that, I absolutely have complete faith in our team and our team's desire to collect. When we started in 2019, we actually increased the number of field visits that we did. That was something that was very important. We actually and even, although I had just basically mentioned to our supervisor at that time that was important, she made sure that we had people going out at least 3 times a week to do field visits. And that, again, that's a testament to our commitment. But then in addition to that, the efforts to provide them with foundation, the kind of the educational foundation or resource, that was hugely helpful. I will share with you that, even regarding, for example, communications and discussions I've had with some of the team members, they're so grateful for the training because they're now able to, they know where to look in the manuals to determine why it is that we do certain things. I absolutely believe that our team, we have the commitment and the drive to do what we need to collect for our people. But this is just one piece of the puzzle. Of course, in addition to our tax enforcement group, we not only have our collections branch, we also have our examination or audit branch.
Yes.
And so, over the next year or so, our desire as well is to be able to provide our auditors with, the resources that they need, because as well for them, it's been quite a long time since the last time that they were able to get training. And again, this is just one step, but I'll tell you this one piece, has a huge, I think, return on investment in terms of, I think all of our people, because, the information that our team was able to gather from this, and not only the information, but the relationships with the instructors, that ability to reach out to a revenue agent who has over 20 years of experience and to ask them about how, to deal with something, or to ask them for where we could find, the information on how we are to collect and on certain of the laws relating to collections. That's invaluable.
And you need that expertise actually, and even the know-how to get your process in order so that you will withstand any challenges if it were to be challenged in court or the like. With that too, you mentioned field visits, and I want to ask, one of the concerns I had that our good speaker brought up was the short-term vacation rentals and the B&Bs. But one of the criticisms that came up before was that many of these businesses transact business with foreign clients, and so the transactions, the bookings, and the payments, everything is done with foreign banks and off island. So the revenue is not reflected or captured or reported on Guam. And is that something that Reven Tax has also had to reconcile in terms of field inspection, spot checking that these businesses exist or are operating, and then ensuring that they're indeed licensed on Guam and reporting? Or can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. Thank you so much, Senator Torres. So, and thank you for bringing this up, because yes, of course, there are websites that are not in English, and that, of course, we still, because they offer services in Guam, that we still have to work to regulate and enforce on. So early on, our team, again, we were not only looking at Airbnb, we were also looking at other platforms that were foreign platforms, so that we can identify the locations and try to figure out how we're going to be able to enforce on it. That particular segment, of course, the foreign websites is actually a little bit challenging, and even as we have discussed it, with some of our counterparts, even in the Cnmi, there are challenges with those trying to enforce on those websites, because, of course, they're not in English, and our resources in-house, we do not have someone to translate. So there are challenges in that. But I mean, even with that, we still do our best to to try to figure out how we can do operations for those. But of course, again, if there are monies that are received outside of Guam, again, that's something that is, of course, challenging for us to manage and work to regulate on. But we have identified that as an area that we definitely need to be looking at in terms of the regulation of those types of businesses.
And I'm glad you're on it. The last comment I want to make is I want to give DRT kudos for having a big role in increasing the voter registration numbers on Guam over the past year. As a result of the motor voter law, I was told by the Guam Election Commission that voter registrations, which were averaging about 10 a month, are now over 300. And I just want to acknowledge that, because you have been an avenue for people to register to vote, which is a critical component of our governance on Guam. So thank you to your staff for that. And, Sizus Masi, for all you do. I see the long lines on Saturday. I was quite alarmed when I saw that. I thought something was wrong, but I realized that it was really the effort of trying to do something very right for people by giving them the opportunity to renew their licenses on the weekends. And I just want to commend all of you for your sacrifice, and it is certainly appreciated. Sizus Masi.
Sizus Masi, Senator Torres. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Torres. Senator Tello, do you have any questions?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And buenas and good morning. Thank you so much for being here today, Daphne. It's always a pleasure to see my niece doing so well at Reven Tax, and all the accomplishments that you've achieved. I appreciate it. And also to you as well.
Mr. Edmund Villanueva, he's our Chief of Administration.
Yes. It's kind of hard to see sometimes after, or to know who's behind the mask. But thank you as well for all your hard work at DRT. And, Daphne, I know that you're looking at an assessment coming up, hopefully, for all agencies, including DRT, with innovating technology. And that assessment coming up, I guess there's an RFP that's out right now. And I'm hoping that with that RFP, there's a lot of things needed in that RFP for this assessment that's going to help bring everybody together, especially DRT, DOA, with the Office of Technology together. I just wish you luck on that. It's going to be very important. I think you have to have it done before the end of July. So just keep an eye open on that one. It's really important. I'll talk with you later on that as far as. The other one is that I greatly appreciate all your staff and everything, all the efforts they're making to get people, on track with their registration, their ID card, the real Guam ID card, the driver's license, as well as, the business license. I've learned to use Reven Tax online, and it's very, very convenient. In fact, I registered my car on time and received within days my sticker for my license plate. So everything is running really smooth, even through a time of crisis. So I commend you guys for doing that, keeping it up. However, I was questioning about the fees with regards to credit cards. Are you still able to waive the fees for individuals using credit cards?
So back in, I believe, March, when Governor Leon Guerrero did announce the team plan, there was talk about, of course, one of the 5 points that was indicated was, of course, the waiving of the credit card fees for people who paid by credit card, and that was, I believe, the team plan indicated from April 1 through June 30. With regards to the extension of that, I know that the fiscal team has been in discussion about the credit card fees, because we recognize, of course, the importance of that being a component of making sure that we continue to have people, or that there's some motivation for people to file, online. And so, because historically, and just to share, there were actually people in the past who, they may file online, but they still pay they still, walk in their payment. So, that is not achieving what we're hoping for it to achieve, right? There has to be some level of motivation. So when you're able to do, everything online, both payments and the filing, of course, that's helpful, right? Again, to go back to, it's just not really pragmatic to file online if there's no motivation, or if they're almost, if there's no motivation, or if there's some fee to pay.
Exactly.
And so that's something, again, I know that the fiscal team has been in discussion about it, but when the team plan was announced, that it would go through June 30, 2020.
Okay, so right now it has, to June 30. So maybe we might know something next week that it might be extended. I hope so, because that's one way to encourage people to go online if they can use their credit cards. And is the $2 million that was set aside in the COVID to cover these fees, the $2 million, I think there was a $2 million set aside to cover these charges?
In terms of the budget for the credit card fee, that's probably something that's more perhaps a DOA, a question or for DOA.
Okay.
In terms of the fees themselves and the banking relationships and the negotiations for those types of fees, my understanding is that that's a Treasurer of Guam or Department of Administration function.
Okay, well, I hope you look into that, because it's so important. Maybe even look at procuring a credit card services to cover this cost of a vendor. Also, like all of us, we and especially because my dad lives in Barragata Heights, and I was able to pass by there on a Saturday and saw the lines. And is there any way at all that maybe you can look at to maybe finding ways alternatively to schedule individuals to come ahead of time so that the line wouldn't be long? And I'm I know you brought that up earlier, but I'd like to bring it up again to you to know how important it is, because we get tons of calls to our offices complaining about this, and what you can do to, alleviate some of those issues there. Find alternatives that would help be more customer friendly, in that perspective. So, but I greatly appreciate you guys going out on a Saturday, and doing that. So I hope it continues on. Did you receive any, was there any lapses in FY19?
I am not, as far as I know, I don't recall. What I recall was that we did not have a lapse, but let me just, can you? We did not have any lapses.
Okay. So, and then it's probably not anticipated to have any lapses in 2020 then?
At this point, I don't believe that we're tracking to have a lapse, ma'am.
What about, Daphne, any of the special funds, are you anticipating any change in a lower amount that's been anticipated in any of these special funds? Whether Better Public Service Fund or the Tax Collection Enhancement Fund, Banking and Insurance Fund? Do you anticipate anything lower than what was projected?
Well, I will share with you that coming into fiscal year 2021, and as I mentioned, really, although we were trying to determine, in terms of operations, the best way that we can continue to try to keep the spread of this novel coronavirus down. So at one point, we were actually operating where we did not have full 100% of our workforce actually, coming into the office to work, because again, we were worried about, spreading the virus. And so, I think around the nation there was some movement to have these 14-day kind of pockets, and I think they were calling them bubbles, where you would have a bubble of 14 day, a group that's does this 14-day bubble. But for us now, again, as I mentioned, we're really operating at almost 100% of our capacity in terms of the number of people and of our people actually reporting to work. And in fact, our people, because of the need for our services, are, we're really, again, doing our best to try to catch up. I think that as I've been discussing with our team in this past week, in the last couple weeks, in terms of vehicle registration, and thank you, Senator, for taking the time to try to do the vehicle registration online, because that's something that we've been working to advocate for. But in terms of vehicle registration, our vehicle registration team has advised that it looks like we're getting up to speed, and that we've gotten a good amount of people to get registered already, both online while we were closed, and then also through walk-ins as we have opened up. So, with regards to the fees, again, we're doing our best to serve our people. Again, even outside of the pandemic, it was challenging for us, to serve. And of course, we've had, again, and you mentioned, of course, some concerns about our lines. We've worked prior to the pandemic, and I think early this year, we were able to do a little bit of reorganization in our building. We're thankful to some of our other agencies that were able to transfer some stanchions to us. So we tried to reorganize the lines in vehicle registration so that the flow was better, so that we can really accommodate kind of a better line. So we also tried to reorganize some of the seating in front of our driver's license area. So, I think, our goal is, of course, to service as many of our people as we can. We recognize that the services that we offer are very critical. And so, in terms of trying to target, our target is to, again, what we've been trying to do is to try to service people and to try to get things up to speed. And so we're hopeful that, with regards to our fees, to the extent possible, that we're going to continue to try to, again, serve so that, not only we can continue to collect fees, but so we can continue to serve our people and, again, provide the services they need, and hopefully, very soon try to get, people caught up so that we don't have expired vehicle registrations and expired driver's licenses. Those are things that are very important to us.
Greatly appreciate all that work, and I have no doubt in my mind that you're going to accomplish all those goals that you have set forth. Again, I appreciate you being here, and all the people at Reven Tax for all their hard work, especially during this COVID crisis, those who did come into the office during that time. I just wanted to say we greatly appreciate everything that you and your department, and Daphne, in the event that you're seeing any kind of change in any of these special funds that would assist the agency, you need to submit a supplemental budget, to cover that, okay? So keep a keen eye on what's going on. Of course you do, because you have to do the CRER and, reports, and you can see all those numbers coming in. So just be prepared for any kind of changes that may happen. Again, thank you so much for your time, and thank you, sir.
Situs Masi, Senator Tadegui.
Love to the family. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Senator Tadegui. Senator Therese Terlai, do you have any questions, ma'am?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Shimizu and Mr. Villanueva, for your presentation today and answering all the questions. And I want to commend you and all the staff at the Department of Revenue and Taxation for the work that you've done during our health emergency, and for the assurance that you have given the community throughout, from the very start, that you were dedicated to it, you were prioritizing those payments, and that you were working closely with the IRS to ensure that that was going to go without flaw. And it did. And so I want to thank you very much for the long hours that you put in, on top of, taking care of all the other duties that Reven Tax has, licenses, taxes, registrations, and so Situs Maasi. All the kudos that you've received from all my colleagues for all the different programs also that have seen progress throughout the year. I want to thank you for those also.
Situs Masi, Senator Chalahi. I want to just say thank you, because I know, to the chair's point, this legislature has been very supportive of our agency, and we're very grateful for that. I like to say this, but really, I believe it's the synergy, right? Remember, 1 + 1 doesn't have to equal 2. 1 + 1 can equal 100. And when we work together, and I believe that probably the foundation of a lot of our successes have been that we've been able to successfully, again, work with our legislators, with our other agencies, and of course, our team, their commitment. And so, Situs Masi, Senator Chalahi, for really recognizing that. I know that our team really appreciates, hearing the sentiments of the body.
My dad always tells me that every day when I go there, too. It's like that revenue and taxation is really a good example of what all the government agencies should be doing during this health emergency. So, thank you. So speaking of the health emergency, the government of Guam, the request was $134.8 million for the one-time checks, and that was supposed to cover 60,000 to 70,000 residents. So I wanted to know, what is the status of these stimulus checks? How many are left to be sent out, and have we reached the $134.8 million in payments?
Thank you, Senator Chalahi. So regarding the Economic Impact Payment Program for Guam, as of June 25, we have processed a little bit over $126 million, and that equates to approximately 68,900 payments. And so, those have and that's out of the $134.8 million that was approved by the IRS and the Treasury. The DRT has until December 31, 2020 to make out all these payments. These are actually advance payments. And of course, there is the opportunity for those individuals who, because of perhaps maybe they weren't eligible because their income threshold or for some other reason, that there is the opportunity when people file their 2020 tax returns in 2021 for them to recoup some difference. So, we have until December 31, 2020. We are processing payments on a weekly basis. And that is very important because, we want to make sure people know, that they have, they can count on, regular payments, and that they, and know when those payments will be coming. So we have been, as a standard, we have a weekly payment run, and so as of yesterday, we did process and transmit to the Treasurer of Guam 1,015 checks totaling about $1.69 million. And we're going to continue to do that again. Now, of course, as people continue to file their returns and as our system, processes those, then, we'll continue to pay.
Okay, good. Because we continue to receive questions, why didn't I receive mine? And I always tell them that you've put up all the information, contact you by email, and that they should get an answer, and they always seem to get an answer. So thank you for that also. On the May 2020 income tax refund status report, it shows that government has paid out 2,026 tax refunds for 2019, totaling $8.4 million. These refunds are for returns filed on or before January 28, 2020. But this is only one day after the tax returns were accepted for 2019. But the report also shows that you've processed 30,000 refund returns, totaling $84.7 million, and these are just awaiting payment. I want to commend you for this processing, and can you tell us what is the average amount of time that it takes your department to process a tax refund?
In terms of tax refunds, if you mean tax refund payments, so, with regards to refund...
Well, the returns.
Oh, returns.
Yeah.
So with regards to returns, of course, there are different types of returns. Some are more complicated than others. It's really difficult to say how long it takes to process again because, of course, there are simpler returns that may, take just a little bit of time, but then there are more complicated. The other piece of it is that in addition to the processing, of course, there's the receipt of the return, there's the scanning of the return, there's the inventory of the return, then there's the ultimate, of course, storing of the actual physical copies, that has to get done. So all of those, taking that into consideration is really difficult to say. But what I do know is that our EDP and Central Files team, they're headed by a very experienced person who actually, has been at the agency for many years and who's very knowledgeable on the system and very knowledgeable on, how to process. And as she makes it a priority to make sure that the people who are processing, have some level of training and in order to process so that we can get them out as quickly as we can.
All right. Well, you've been able to process 30,000 of the 2019 tax returns, and then they wait for payment. So I think that's significant, and I'm just curious whether you are able to do this within 30 days or whether, of course, for the less complicated ones, the ones that you find without issue. Do you think that's a fair estimate?
I think that, with regards to what our focus has been during this public health emergency, and I don't have the prior year RLR, the refund liability report in front of me, but when I looked at I believe I tried to compare April with the prior year in April, what I did notice is that if you look at the row F, which is refund returns unprocessed and estimated, you'll notice that right now for 2019 returns, as of the June 1, 2020 run date for this particular report, we have 4,884. What I can share with you, Senator, is our priority has been, making sure that we process and making sure that we get payments out for EIP. So I'm confident that with regards to at least, the number of returns that we have is unprocessed, that we're seeing that we have a whole lot less unprocessed returns now than we have historically. And again, that's because really we have done our best to prioritize the processing. Unlike some of the other jurisdictions, perhaps some of the other insular areas, because of the processing of EIP, we've had to discuss, the processes and how we process returns with the other insular areas as well. Of course, unlike the other insular areas, Guam not only has the of course, we have the responsibility and the desire to make sure that we pay out our people in line with the pillar of the CARES Act that required, rapid payment. But we also, have the responsibility of ensuring that we comply with the permanent injunction that was issued in 2013, so that we make sure that we continue to process, so that we do not make payments more, so that we make payments in line with the injunction, which requires payments to be made within 6 months of the due date or 6 months of the date filed, whichever is later. So it's been a huge priority for us, and that's something that when we were activated, of course, during the public health emergency, we were able to allocate a lot of our resources toward, and that's why you're seeing, again, I don't have the prior year return information for the RLR to tell you what the level of actual returns received was for the last tax year, but I can say that when I've looked at it, again, the unprocessed returns were definitely improving on, and again, a lot of it has to do with just our focus to make sure we get our people paid.
Well, that's what I'm trying to highlight, is that it seems to me the processing of tax returns has been at a very impressive rate, and that there is no real issue of delay in processing of these returns. The delay is in the payment, so I want to commend you for that these are processed it seemed very timely, and it's been very helpful for, of course, in this, to get their economic stimulus payments out.
Yeah.
So thank you again. That's what I'm trying to do, is commend you for these swift processing of returns.
Sijos Masi, Senator, and thank you too, because if you kind of look back at just the history over probably the last just a little bit over a year, when we started back, I think back in probably March or April last year, 2019, we began to make payments of refunds on a weekly basis, and we were consistently doing that. And again, to go back to, of course, the importance of some level of consistency in terms of, the expectation of our people in terms of when they're going to be paid, that was very important, and to make sure, that we continue to comply. So that's something that, I'm grateful, to Director Byrne over at DOA, for we work together to make sure that we make regular weekly payments. I think that probably during this public health emergency, we probably only missed maybe, I think early on there was 1 week because we were completely closed. But after that, again, we've worked to try to resume that. And I know that he on the cash flow side has been working on that.
Yes, I acknowledge that there have been regular payments of refunds, and I'm grateful for that. However, there remain 30,000 that are already processed, waiting payment, and I believe at this time in our community, payment of those, even within the 6 months that we are required to pay them, that if we could pay them sooner, it's really going to help those people who are still waiting for unemployment and who have just been impacted generally. And I know you recognize that. Do you expect a reevaluation of real property taxes in 2021? Or the real property values?
So we did not include in our budget for FY 2021 the revaluation. It's actually, I believe it's a quinquennial requirement. The last time that we did do it was 2014, and I think prior to that, probably the mid part of the first decade of this century. So, it wasn't put into our budget in this coming fiscal year, no ma'am.
Okay. I saw that, and I wanted to just get your confirmation. And then the Territorial Educational Fund, which is from the real property taxes. It's called Territorial Educational Facilities Fund. This is funded by the real property taxes. It's tracking a negative for 2020 of 4.3 million. And can you tell us why this tracking is low for real property taxes?
You know what, I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't have an exact reason. I mean, perhaps I know, and I'm not sure what report you're referring to, but I know during our public health emergency, I think as the chair, Mr. Chair mentioned, of course, the April 20 deadline for real property tax did fall during the time that our office was shut down, and that perhaps may contribute to some of it. I'm not sure. But the other piece of it is, which I do think is worth mentioning, is that for the first time actually ever, our team, in terms of collections, our team has never dedicated an actual resource to the collection of real property taxes. I'd like to say, late last year or early this year, and of course, it's a little bit, the time frame is a little bit difficult or challenging only because with this pandemic, it's kind of thrown my reference points off for certain things. But we had already begun to talk about allocating a specific collections person just specifically for real property taxes. That's something, again, that we've never had before, but that's something, that our team had been discussing and which perhaps I need to go back and to discuss with them on. But, again, there are certain collection efforts which we've identified that we need to perhaps resume now that we're up and running.
Yes, yeah, I do. I guess I wanted to find out if there's some issue with the estimate of real property taxes, or the issue is just with the collection, and so that we can apply that to the 2021 budget going forward. But okay, if you, any information you can provide on that, so, because it is tracking low. I want to also commend you on your budget request, which is only 200,000 over last year's budget. It's the same amount of staff. You've talked about the 33 vacant positions and that you're planning to fill them this fiscal year. All right. And then the tax attorney, that was also budgeted in FY20. You're hoping to fill that in 2021. You said with an RFP that's going to go out soon. All right. And then I know there's been a couple discussions on this tobacco, but the auditor recommended ceasing of the bonded warehouse system. That, he's asking us to repeal that bonded warehouse law. But absent the new technology that Customs has discussed, obtaining to track items coming into Guam, and without the tobacco stamp being implemented, as you said, it's not been implemented yet, has DRT been able to pursue any other type of increased accounting of tobacco actually brought into the port compared to the amount actually reported as sold on the DRT filings, which occurs months later?
Right. So regarding tobacco tax or cigarette tax and how that works, do you know how it works? Is not it's not like a regular GRT, which is based on sales. How it works is there is a bonded warehouse. It's not a government bonded warehouse. There are bonded warehouses, and Reven Tax, our agency, manages those bonded warehouses, so that way, anything that is either put into or taken out of those warehouses, that's monitored by us. Now, regarding the payment of the taxes for those warehouses, for tobacco, what happens is, as the product is taken out of the bonded warehouse, that is the point that that's the trigger for there to be a need to make a payment of those tobacco taxes. And our team we actually have people who probably 5 days a week are out, making sure that the bonded warehouses are monitored, also working to ensure that the inventories that's being reported are proper and appropriate. It is a bit challenging, but we do make sure that we try to the best we can follow the mandate, which is for us to make sure that we do those. So that's what we do with regards to the bonded.
All right. Well, that sounds like the process that what you're describing is the process that the auditor reviewed. He reviewed DRT's action, but he was very critical and said that there were huge gaps, and that it was so flawed, in fact, that he wants us to repeal the entire system. He says there are no bonds put down for these bonded warehouses, so there's really no penalty that you can collect if they don't comply. He also said that the monitoring by revenue and taxation was not adequate, and that's why I'm asking if, since that audit came out, you've been able to change those procedures or to add on anything that actually, compares what comes in at the port versus what, you are reporting, or they are reporting as coming out of the bonded warehouse, or the different. He made several suggestions as to where the gaps are, and so I'm asking if there have been improvement in compliance at those gap areas.
Well, I think one of the main things is making sure that we do have people who are trained, who know how to take inventory. I think that was probably one of the items we discussed with the public auditor, I think, upon the kind of as we were doing the closing meeting. That's something I'd like to say. I believe that we do our best to, to provide or to make sure that the people who are going out to bonded are appropriate. And I believe that, the findings of the public auditor in the use tax audit, of course, those are things, Senator Sherlahi, that are important for us to make sure that we address. Honestly, I would have to go back to our team to really find out, what specific measures that they have taken. But I do know that, we did note it. We did talk with the public auditor and his team before he closed out the audit and before he issued the audit report. But, I will share with you, it is important. I know, of course, he did recognize that there were certain gaps. As we went through those with his team, we did, work on discussing how we might be able to fix those items. And again, some of it really went back to, making sure that when people go out, they understand the process, they understand what's required and involved. But, I can say, over the last, my understanding is of course that we have worked to make sure that there's a certain level of security over those, and I've been reassured by our supervisor that we're continuing to work to make progress to make sure that we're doing the best we can to monitor those. Now, in terms of the specific items, I'm sorry, I would have to get back to you on those specific findings from the public auditor's report and to let you know how we might have been able to address. I don't have that
All
with
right.
me.
Well, I would appreciate that because it's especially important in light of the amounts that he talks about that are potentially lost in taxes. The second item is that in light of the non-implementation of the tax, the tobacco stamps, rather, that yes, that it would leave us with a very flawed system. So please, yes, if you could put some priority to that, I would appreciate it, and I think it would improve our revenues overall. There's an estimated, currently I think on the CRERs, they're estimating a loss of about 18 million in withholding taxes. And, but they temper that with, the effects of the CARES funding, they say, and the unemployment, by the end of the year, that they're hoping it's going to be less than that $18 million loss in withholding. Are you notified of how many of the unemployment applications, are checking that they will have their withholding taxes withdrawn immediately or from those payments, or
No.
versus?
Yeah. No, ma'am, I have not
Okay.
been in communication with DOL on that, but I do understand, there is an opt-in, right?
Yes,
And
they
so
have to opt.
I'm not aware of that.
All right. I think it's a default opt-out, right?
Yes.
So you're going to have to account for that at the end. All right. Well, that's a significant, we're looking at significant losses in withholding. That's the issue. The other special funds, the Banking and Insurance Enforcement Fund, the Better Public Service Fund, and the Tax Collection Enhancement Fund are also tracking less than expected for FY20. Have you been advised to adjust your budget for FY20 or your request for FY21 based on these projections?
No, I mean, with regards to the funds themselves, perhaps, of course, in terms of the Tax Collection Enhancement Fund, at the point that we were closed, of course, we were not able to issue passports. And of course, with regards to the issuance of passports, that's really, we do follow the U.S. State Department's guidelines with regards to that. So when we were not issuing, and I believe that it was for life or death emergencies only, that was something that, of course, we couldn't help. But again, now that we've resumed somewhat normal operations, I'm expecting that we're going to see a big increase in those, and hopefully, again, as I mentioned to Senator Tadagui, although we were not able to collect on some things during this public health emergency shutdown, of course, we're hoping now that we're able to recover those, in our efforts as we work to try to get services out. But
All right. Well, I'm pretty sure they would have taken that into account, and they're still predicting negative, but yeah, whatever, if you could take a look at that, yeah. So you've not adjusted budget for 2020 or 21 at this point?
Our FY 2020 budget, as I understand it, still stands at the same level, is
All right.
my understanding.
Okay, my final question is just, one of the short-term goals listed for the Real Property Tax Division was to identify all taxable Chamorro Land Trust properties that have escaped assessment, it says, for inclusion in the annual assessment roll. Can you explain that further, and how many properties are estimated to fall into this category?
I'm sorry, Senator, I don't have that specific
Okay.
information.
All right, that we can, if you could just send that later. I just like to get the details on that and what amount we're kind of looking at. All right, and again, thank you to your entire department. Thank you for your flexibility. I noticed that one thing I appreciate too is your responsiveness. When the lines are long, you come up with a different plan. When there was a huge demand, that you've also, added on to your services. So I think that's a very good role model for the rest of the agency. Sizu Asmasi. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Senator Therese. On the issue of stimulus, I just want to make sure that the people of Guam understand that if you did not file your taxes on 2018 or 2019, you're not going to get a stimulus. If you file it today, you won't get a stimulus next week. There is a process, and the people of Guam need to understand that. And I've received calls, and many of my colleagues have, and I had to remind them. The sooner you turn it in, the sooner you probably get it. The later you turn it in, the later you get it. And if come December and the time expires, oh well, move along. Senator Lee, do you have any questions, ma'am?
I do, Mr. Chair. Sujus Masi, and good morning, and buenas, Daphne, and shout out to Ms. Mickey Santos and Mr. Villanueva and all the senators who are hanging still and listening to all of your responses. I really appreciate it. I just want to thank you so much for your updates, for your entire presentation, but especially your update regarding training. I know that that was an important component, and it sounds like it hasn't been done in a very long time, so I appreciate your efforts to make sure that the employees are trained. And I just really want to especially give a shout out to the DRT employees that we know have, just for their service. And I can imagine how challenging it is to work in a high-stress environment, especially when, the doors have been closed and people are very on edge trying to make good on their payments and just try to make sense of all of these different things, new things that have come up. So I just really appreciate them, and I want to thank them for their past work, but also thank them in advance for their continued service of our people, especially during this time. I know that the administration has really placed an emphasis on improving collections, and DRT has been charged with carrying this out. So I want to thank the Oversight Chair for her question regarding the use tax. And as you mentioned, the public auditor's recommendations, and so thanks in advance to you and CQA for really working on this and bringing some parity to this collections. So I also want to note for the record that this budget request includes funding for additional investigators, revenue officers and revenue agents, and Mr. Villanueva has detailed those FTEs for the committee. Can you put a figure as to how much in additional collections you might anticipate if these employees are hired next year?
Senator, I'm sorry, I cannot, provide an actual figure. It's really difficult to tell. Again, for a lot of our team, it's the first time they're really, being trained. And, in fact, what we're seeing and what I think is really great about what's happening is we're actually seeing some people move up into higher levels of positions, higher positions are being promoted. So now we're seeing some new people, take on supervisory roles. And I'm very hopeful. And actually, I'm very proud of our team because I will share with you, and thank you for recognizing their commitment because, we have, just people who, of course, during the public health emergency and, when people, we were shut down and people were very worried about how they were going to be able to make payments. When the EIP program and the CARES Act was passed, it was so hugely important for our people. We had, we have people with comorbidities and who also are health compromised, but during the health emergency, they were willing to come in. And so, I think it says a lot that they were willing to do that because they recognize, and I have said this before, but, we are part of the community. We are people's brothers and sisters and mothers and cousins and neighbors. And the idea of not getting these payments out to our people on time, it was just not acceptable. So, thank you for recognizing that, and again, Reven tax really, what's at the forefront of our thoughts always is how we can better serve. I think Senator Chalahi as well for mentioning the fact that, we're constantly working to adapt. We are far from perfect, but we are not scared to go out and try something and then to make an adjustment if there is a need. What we know is that we're going to do our best and we're going to try and we're going to, put out our best efforts. And I think people talk about Babe Ruth, right? They talk about how many times that he has made home runs, but he has made many, or he made many, I'm sorry, he made many strikeouts as well. So we're not going to be perfect. We're far from perfect, but we're going to keep trying, and we're going to do our best in everything that we do. And again, what's really wonderful, and thank you for recognizing our team, because they really, again, I will share with you, when the DRT team, when they're recognized, it really just means a lot, because the level of commitment that our team has put in. You can't honestly put a dollar figure on the heart and soul of our people. And I get a little teary-eyed because I will share with you, it was very difficult for me coming into this, having to activate our team during a public health emergency, when we had, of course, people who were being hospitalized. And a lot of course, early on, the people who were hospitalized had very serious, they were in a very serious situation. And so for me, personally, it was very difficult to bring our people in. I also ended up coming in because I wanted to make sure that I was with them, during the time that they were working as well. And so again, I thank you, Senator, and thank you all the senators for recognizing that, and again, for your continued support.
Thank you, Daphne. Can you provide a status report on your department's efforts, particularly through the insurance commissioner, to implement the update to workers' compensation rates? Given that it's set to go into effect around August of this year, I just wanted an update to what steps DRT has taken to assess and improve any proposals from insurance companies. I know one of the amendments in the bill was to give you additional time to be able to do that, so I just wanted to follow up.
I'm sorry, Senator, I don't have an update on that, but I can work to get an update. During the public health emergency, of course, our boards were not meeting. I know I need to talk with our team about making sure that we resume, again, as we're trying to resume somewhat normal operations, also start resuming normal operations in terms of our board. So I will have to get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you very much. And then we've also heard, I know that you're mentioning that boards have not been meeting, but we've heard from members of the Cannabis Commission and they've stated how engaged both you and Director Linda DeNorsi have been on that board, and how critical your input is. So I just want to thank you very much for your participation and for your commitment there. How well does this budget request fund the department's responsibilities for medical and adult use cannabis? Will you be able to afford to accomplish all of your regulatory activities?
With regards to the cannabis regulation and enforcement, we did include 4 positions in the regulatory section, and that's for specifically for, to address, of course, cannabis and of course our other mandates. But, we are working to ramp up that area because we do recognize the importance of making sure that we have sufficient enforcement in that area.
Thank you, Daphne. And I know the chair had mentioned kind of the spacing in your facility up in Barragata, but I also just want to ask you, and I know we've communicated about this over the past few months, your satellite location in Agustin Shopping Center, is that still open?
Yes, it is still open.
So I actually went there to get my real ID a few months back, thankfully before COVID, and it was just really, really warm up there. And I know that the employees are really, having a hard time. It's difficult for them to concentrate and do their work. And if we have to have conversation with our landlord over there to just make sure that there's ventilation going through there, especially now, right? Because I know that a lot of Manamku and people with access issues will choose to go there instead of kind of waiting in the long line. And I just want to make sure that it's comfortable, not just for the people that we're serving, but also for our employees. So I just really want to close by thanking you, Daphne, for being responsive, especially to the latest bill that we introduced. That's Bill 370, which would require the electronic filing of business privilege taxes, which is an upgrade to Guam's current policy. And I want to thank the Oversight Chair for her co-sponsorship of that measure. I want to thank you and your team for continuing to ensure that the stimulus checks and our tax refunds get into the hands of our people as soon as humanly possible. And I also just wanted to really thank you, Daphne, for being so responsive not only to us as senators, but I've heard so many media interviews over the last few weeks and months where you've really kept our community up to date on your progress. You've been open to answering many, many questions from people, and this is the kind of public service that we really need to be providing to our people, and so I just really want to just andungkla na sidus maasi for your service and for your professionalism. Your role is extremely important, and I'm very proud that you take such pride in it and that you do it so well. So thank you very much.
Sidus Masi, Senator Lee, and I want to thank also, I mean, of course, our governor and lieutenant governor for as well, you know, having faith in me. But I also want to thank our legislature because, you know, you did also confirm my appointment. And I want to thank you because this past year, of course, as I mentioned, I really believe in the idea of synergy. I really believe in the idea that, you know, working together, we can all, you know, make things so much better for all of our people. And, you know, I want to share, you know, for me, it's very personal. Serving our people is very important. I really do care for our people, and as we work to make decisions, you know, we really do our best to have all our people's best interests at heart. So I want to thank you as well, Senator Lee, and I want to thank, of course, our chair, who also, he remembers that he did come from Reven Tax, and we thank him as well for his continued support, and also our chair, you know, who has also made sure, you know, of course, we were having regular meetings, and as time went on, it was a little bit more challenging, but I want to thank our chair as well for her continued support, and all of the legislators. You know, again, Reven Tax, you know, we, as Senator mentioned, we, you know, do collect the majority of the general fund, you know, of course, for our people and for our government, so that we can continue to provide services, and we really do appreciate all of the support that we get from our legislature.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Thank you, colleagues, for the questions you have asked, you have posed to the Department of Revenue Tax. The committee will conclude this budget hearing. The committee will continue to receive testimony. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriation, and Housing. Submit it via email to Senator Joe S. Augustine at gmail.com. Sidus Masi for your attendance and participating in today's hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching. The budget hearing on Bill 282-35 LS relative to the Department of Revenue and Taxation is now adjourned. It is now 11:36. Thank you.